Kathy. It's Cynthia Yance also.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hey, Kathy.
Steve, they all have all the handouts,
Okay.
so we're just going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, very good. So thanks for setting this up, and thanks everyone for joining. Again, my name is Steve Hahn. I'm with AT&T, and my role is really a coordination role. I help folks like Kathy and the local teams working with cities and counties to implement PEG programming on the new AT&T UVerse TV platform. So I'm an interface really with a lot of folks internal at AT&T, network engineers and product folks and operations folks, all the people that play a role in making this happen. Again, thanks for taking the time to meet with us. What I'd like to do is first of all, is not give a speech. Obviously, I want to make this interactive, and I think really to fast forward to the very end, what we want to do is make sure that everyone in the room there, kind of understands how PEG programming works on UVerse TV and what the steps are, fundamentally to implement programming onto the UVerse platform, and then finally, be scored away on what our next steps are, whether that's, a direct action ready to move forward, or if we need to, if there's questions that need to get answered or issues to be resolved, that sort of thing. And so I think do we have representatives? I've got, Kathy, from the information you sent me, we're discussing 3 different channels, the government channel, community access television channel, as well as UATV. Do we have folks in the room representing all 3?
We do. Sky could not be with us today, but in her place we have Mark Warren. Mm-hmm. He's the production coordinator for CAT.
Okay.
And then also joining us we have Andy Mays, and he's the enterprise architect for Fayetteville Public Schools.
Okay. Excellent. So let's do this. Kathy, I hope I sent you a one-pager, kind of an agenda, just a straw man to walk through. Do you have that in front of you?
I did not receive that.
That's okay. It's really, I'll kind of list some things off. It just kind of helps me as we flow through the meeting. So really what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the service surveys that the Fayetteville folks delivered back to us, which is really helpful, just so on the AT&T side we're kind of familiar with what we're dealing with. And then we'll talk a little bit about we'll talk through that programming overview document, which is just kind of a high level and gives a lot of background on how the service works.
Hey,
and then we'll go into the real sort of implementation steps.
Steve, pause just for a moment. Did you guys say you do have copies of what was coming back to us?
Yeah.
Okay, did everybody have
Oh, yes. Yeah, I do have that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most of that is pretty basic stuff. We just look for
Do you need a copy?
not red flags or whatever, way things are done a little bit differently, and really everything looks very familiar, except I do have a question around the government channel.
Go for it.
One of the questions on the survey asked about insertion of programming downstream from the local source.
Roger that.
I'm reading the form correctly. The video equipment and production facilities are at 101 West Rock Street. But the question was answered, yes, the city council and the county quorum court are inserted downstream. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding kind of what the scenario is.
Okay.
Someone in the room sort of explain how that setup works?
Yeah, my name's Neil. I'm the production technician. What we have is technically 2 downstream insertion points. The first is in our building, but basically after our point of it's at the point of entry of the cable system. We have an RG6 line that runs from city council chambers to a box that is a video detection system. That if there's no video detected on the council chambers line, it allows our video to pass through to their encoder modulator unit. If it detects video, it will override our current output from our master control system with the council chambers feed output to the modulator box. Quorum Court is completely out of our facility. It's actually at the Cox Communications sub-head end at Mount Sequoia. It used to be their old insertion point for Fayetteville, and now it all goes off to Johnson. That is, when you throw a switch, they have a video detection box at Mount Sequoia that says, hey, I've got video, I'm going to override government channel coming into me, insert quorum court, and off it goes.
Okay. That's helpful, and that'll be interesting. I think in terms of the way we typically solution programming, that's going to make we're going to have to circle back and kind of think through how to make that work. So I think I probably know the answer to this, but is there a facility where where you would have access to the final, so to speak, the aggregated stream, downstream of those insertion points? Is there any place that the government channel, either on a government facility or elsewhere, could get access to that aggregated signal?
The only way this is probably not what you're wanting to hear, but the only way we ever get access to the aggregated signal is back through the cable lines as a modulated channel. We do not have access to to Mount Sequoia. We do technically have access to the cable feed in our building, but we really have no facility right now to internalize that.
So you've got just like a commercial return feed, basically.
Yes, and I would prefer to start with the highest quality signal possible, baseband, instead of coming back as some modulated cable signal that has a horrendous amount of noise in it.
Understood. So as we walk through this, Neil, and I've talked through, our kind of typical solution. I think we're going to end up having to circle back on this one, and it'll be a one-off, or we'll have to figure out what's the right way to approach this one. Okay.
No problem.
All right. Okay, so let's do this just to move things along. I'm going to walk through the PEG programming overview, and I will go through it at a pretty high level. I think it's helpful in a lot of cases just because it get everyone grounded on how PEG works on U versus TV. I don't want to put anybody to sleep, so I'll go through it quickly, but just stop me if you have questions or want to drill down into something a little bit more. I think it's beneficial to do this before going into kind of the X's and O's of implementation. So if you've got that, I think it's a three-page document. You've got that in front of you. Let me just jump into that and a couple of things first before even really talking about PEG. Just a couple of points about U-verse TV and IPTV in general. A couple things I always want to mention. First is a resource, and that is AT&T.com. It's a great website just for general information about the product, how it works, demonstrations, and then obviously also has programming packages and pricing, and then the ever important qualification tool, which allows someone to enter an AT&T landline phone number, or if you don't have one, a residential service address, and the tool will tell you if you qualify for the service at this point. If you don't, check back often because we continue to build out the network. So just jot that one down or remember it if you can, uverse.att.com. The second point I like to make, just a little bit of cheerleading, I guess, is we're a little over 2 years in market, and we hit 1 million customers in December, which is something we're very proud of. And so obviously the company is very committed to this product and entering this market. We're happy to be in Northwest Arkansas. And then the third and final, just sort of general point is, and I'm sure everybody knows this, but the video business is important to AT&T, the TV business is, but we're not coming in and replicating cable by any stretch. The way we have our network architected is different. The technology we use is different. Now, when you're sitting on your couch watching the ball game, it's a familiar viewing experience, but the way we do this is different in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, we think that are really positive. And ultimately, what we're most excited about is bringing choice to the area, and giving customers alternatives and new ways of doing things and choice in their TV viewing. The key thing about IPTV and the fact that this is a 100% digital all IP network is that it's essentially a client-server sort of architecture, and so I'm sure many people in the room understand content that customers choose to watch to them, as opposed to delivering all of the content down the network and having them sort of sort it via set-top box at their location. Ours is really a two-way communication path. So when a customer chooses they want to watch ESPN, then we send the ESPN signal and not 99 other channels. Anyway, that's one of the fundamental differences, and one of the things that we're really excited about, because it gives us a lot of there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of interesting, cool things in the future. So to kind of segue into PEG is the same way. It's IP streaming technology, and at the most basic level, today you're producing content and sending it to the cable company, and with AT&T do the same thing, but essentially duplicating that stream and then converting it, that signal, and converting it into an IP stream and delivering it to the AT&T network. Simple as that, and we'll go obviously deeper into kind of how to make that happen here in just a moment. But a couple of points I'd like to make to sort of walk through the user experience. It is different from cable, and we think the most important way it's different from cable is back to this sort of theme of choice. With U-verse PEG, customers have the ability to watch government, education, public access programming, and aren't confined to the geographic limit of their particular city or county. Rather, we make that programming available to all customers throughout the entire market area. So, Kathy, you could probably help me with rattling off the areas where AT&T is providing service, and of course that network is growing. But the point there is people living in Fayetteville may have the opportunity to see content from Springdale, and vice versa. Folks living outside of Fayetteville will have access to Fayetteville's programming. So from the consumer's perspective, you've got the ability to watch programming from areas where you may not live, but you may work, or you may have children in school, or you may be interested in the educational programming that's greater than the geographic region of or confines of where you live. And then obviously from the programmer's perspective, the audience sort of grows beyond the city limits and into any AT&T U-verse TV customer throughout the entire market area.
Steve, if I can interrupt you
That's
just
the way
for...
we make that work for customers is we have kind of a single
He can't
starting
hear me
point
while
for
he's
all PEG
talking.
programming, and that's on channel 99 on our user guide. And I'll make a couple of points why we chose 99. First, simply it's an easy number to remember, and it never changes. So if a customer moves from Fayetteville to Bethel Heights, or to Dallas, or to Los Angeles, and their U-verse customers will always know where to go to access their local programming. Another reason we chose 99 is that it's kind of a natural bridge between the local channels, including your big four affiliates and stuff, and your national channels. The national channels like Food Network and Discovery and all that kind of stuff are north of 100.
Steve.
There's a couple of different ways also to get to 99. We wanted to make it easy for customers, and we've listened to feedback along the way as we've developed this product. And so you've got a couple of screenshots there, and I know they're a little bit small, but hopefully you can sort of follow along. On the first page, bottom right, channel 99, that's where you enter the PEG application to get into this array of content.
Steve, I think Kathy has a question.
Sure.
No, I was trying to clarify with the group, Steve, exactly when you say RDMA, what that refers to. And so we just went through that it goes, that we have the service currently in Fort Smith. So people in Fort Smith would be able to watch Fayetteville City Council meetings. Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, Bentonville, which includes Johnson, Little Flock, Bethel Heights, Lowell, and that would be the area.
Are you using a Nielsen DMA as your description of the broadcast area?
Yes.
Okay.
And thank you, Kathy, for providing that feedback. I'm not as familiar locally, but that's a good example. And of course, we're new in the area, but we'll continue to build off the network. We do that just as fast as we can because, as I mentioned, we've got a million subscribers. Our customers are really gobbling it up as quickly as we can make it available. Okay, so back to the ways to get there. If you turn to the second page, I guess you can say there's possible, one can simply type 99 in the remote control. That's easy enough. The other way that where we put it was on the main menu. So if you look at the first screenshot on the second page, customer turns on their service and presses the menu button. This is what they see. So you see it there in that drop down for government education and public access. Is just a jump point right to 99. And so that is, as you might imagine, that's valuable real estate. You can imagine that ESPN or HBO or someone would like to be listed there, but we wanted to, again, to make it very clear and easy for customers. And then the third way is just through the guide. If you look at the bottom left, the guide shows 7 channels at a time, as well as the time frame. And so a lot of people, including myself, kind of channel surf through the guide. Just hit page down, and you go through these groups of channels. So of course, customers can go to 99 that way as well. When a customer selects channel 99, what they'll see is, a list of the communities that have made the PEG programming available. So it's probably important to mention that right now, because we've just recently launched in Northwest Arkansas, there is no channel 99. Channel 99 will appear when we have the first community, first channel up and running. And then as we add communities, you'll see them, again, just in this list. So you see this fictitious, A city in Appleville or whatever. Customer simply selects whatever community they want to watch. And, obviously that may be the one where they live, or it may be the one where they work, or if they're where they teach, or where they have children in school, or any number of other things. And then when a customer selects a city, the next thing they'll see, I'm at the bottom right now, is a preview screen. So in the case of Fayetteville, customer would select Fayetteville and would see, as an example, the 3 channels that we mentioned earlier. And you see live video and audio in a preview screen. You look down at the bottom, there's a channel description, and the way the channel is named and the way it's described, of course, is up to you. As we get into the implementation process, there's kind of a naming convention worksheet that you'd fill out. You can even change that should you want to, but you've got 200 or 225 characters or something to choose how to describe the channel. And so you can go up and down amongst the 3 channels in this preview window, or at any time you press the OK button on the remote and it takes it to full screen, which we try to depict on the last page. Then really intuitively press the back button, you go back to the preview window. If you press the back button again, you go back to the entire list of communities. So it's a really simple and intuitive way to kind of move around, and customers get to pick and choose whatever programming it is that they'd like to watch.
Steve?
Yes.
Is there any way that a customer can get a direct access number to our channel, like any broadcast station?
I'm not exactly. Can you ask? I'm not sure I understood the question.
Okay. Can someone put in a number other than just 99 going through a menu and be able to access our channel that way?
No, the way we've got the platform designed is to kind of aggregate all of that content through the Channel 99 application.
Okay.
Now, could you explain one more time? I'm sorry, this is Mark from Community Access Television. Could you explain one more time why it is set up that way? Why you guys decided to do Channel 99 instead of just having a regular channel for like the access stations or for the PEG channels for that matter?
One of the principal reasons we did it that way, Mark, is based on the way our entire network is architected. I think traditionally in the cable environment, there is the way that industry evolved, and you guys probably know this as well or better than I do. There was a head end in every community served. And as I mentioned earlier, our network is architected differently. What we've got is a single insertion point, which we call a video hub office, that serves the entire market area. So all customers throughout the market area receive all the same programming. So if we were to keep channel 13 or something like that, we would potentially run into conflicts with neighboring communities having the same channel. So in other words, in the cable environment, channel 17 in one city can be different from channel 17 in the neighboring city. That's not the case with the way UVerse is architected. So there's two things. One is the potential for they've got the ability to pick and choose amongst whatever it is they'd like to watch.
So basically, what you're saying is Comedy Central is going to be on channel whatever 65 in pretty much every market. Basically, I mean that's why you guys can't do the no matter where it's going to be 65 Comedy Central in whatever city you guys have it in. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I actually don't know the answer to that. And Comedy Central would be over somewhere in the beyond 100.
Well, I was just using that as an example.
Yeah, I understand. But so if it's 160 or whatever, I don't know that it's 160 in Atlanta and also in Wichita and also in Kansas City. It might be, but I really don't know.
But Steve, it is accurate to say that Channel 99 is our PEG programming if they're in California or.
That's true, and there's an advantage to that, obviously, in that in our material on our website and the channel guides, in the U guide, which is a print piece that goes out monthly. Since it's consistent, we can message towards Channel 99 and that kind of thing. So that's one of the advantages. It never changes. Whereas if you move around and have different cable subscriptions or whatever, there's not necessarily the consistency. With Uverse, you're always going to find it in the same place.
Right. That's what I was meaning.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. That's the problem with being on a phone, I guess.
What's his name?
Steve,
Okay, so that again, I went through that sort of quickly, but are there any other questions about IPTV in general, or Uverse TV, or Channel 99 and PEG programming on Uverse TV?
Hey, Steve, we've been joined by a couple of folks. I want to make sure you know they're in the room. We have Don Marr, who's the Chief of Staff for the Mayor of Fayetteville. And we have Aubrey Shepard, who heads up the Telecom Board here in Fayetteville. And we have several questions for you. Who wants to go first? Don?
Great. I just had a quick question on the quality of the channel at 99. Is it the same quality that we would be used to seeing when we view a current PEG channel under the cable provider?
The short answer is yes. Our feedback has been that it's as good or better. But as you know, quality is sort of a subjective measurement, and it can be impacted by a lot of things, including the source content and the display, the type of TV. So I can't definitively say it's always better, but we feel that it is as good, and in many cases better than what you'll see on the cable network.
Okay, but to a non-techie, like I come in and turn my TV on. I'm not sophisticated enough to know 1080 DPI and all the things that you have with TV-related items. When I look at the channel programming, regardless of what it is, would it be comparable to a layman person what I'm watching today?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. And I always feel like I've got to caveat a little bit just because there's so much variation. But yes, we feel that the viewing quality is every bit as good as what you've got on traditional cable.
So it's not going to look like something off of the internet, like you're just watching like a YouTube video or something. It's not going to be pixelated.
In fact, since the time we launched the PEG product, we've made a significant enhancement with regard to the resolution and the encoding rate to improve the quality. There's folks in the room that probably are even more familiar with web-based video than I am, but I think typically, again, depending on the source, YouTube, stuff like that, might encode video at 240 kbs or maybe even up to 400 kbs. The bit rate for Uverse is 1.25 megabits per second. So I'm not a video engineer and not trying to get too deep into that, but you can see that's 4 or 5x of what's typical quote web video or YouTube type stuff. So obviously we designed it that way because people are going to be watching this on a TV and not on a little bitty player on a computer screen. So comparisons to web video aren't really applicable, even though this is it's IPTV, it's the language of the internet. It's a far higher quality than your typical webcast kind of stuff.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, this is Neil from the government channel. My question is, when you said that the specifications have changed, is that reflected in the document that we received about the rollout? Because I read in there that you encode at 480 by 480 pixels, where we currently handle 720 by 480.
The 480 by 480 is what we do, and it's the same as our commercial channels, Neil. And I've asked that. I get asked that question a lot, and again, that's the way the entire Uverse IPTV platform works. And it's been explained to me, that the set-top box, the software on the set-top box, series of algorithms and other stuff that I'm not smart enough to understand, render the picture in your standard 4:3 aspect ratio. So it is a 480 by, the pixels are 480 by 480. That's not any, the PEG is the same way we do everything else, Comedy Central, et cetera, on our standard def channels.
But it is different than what you got on current delivery platform.
Yeah.
Andy, I think you had a question.
I have a few questions, Steve. This is Andy. Andy Mays. I'm a member of the City Telecom Board, and I also work for the Fayetteville Public School District, so I'll kind of change hats here. The first question is, you refer to a set-top. That's obviously the encoder that interprets the signal for a standard television system. Is there a limit to the number of set-tops you can have in a single house, and are there any restrictions on different channels being sent through those set-tops in a single residence?
That's a great question, and kind of a general Uverse question, and I think I know the answer, but I guarantee uverse.AT&T.com will tell you exactly. So the number of let me answer it two ways. At any one time, there can be 4 streams of video coming into a single household, and 2 of those, in most cases, 2 of those can be high definition, and all of them can be recorded at the same time. So you can have 4 different TVs, each has its own set-top box, of course. 4 different TVs watching 4 different programs. In most cases, 2 of those programs can be high definition. Now, a 5th TV can watch a recorded program, or a 5th and 6th TV can join in to those other streams as well. But the key is 4 streams into the home at a given time. Okay, now, to talk about set-top boxes, I think, and that was Andy that asked, right?
That's correct.
Andy, I think it's 8 is the maximum that can be acquired on an individual account, but I'm not 100% sure. But again, I bet that information is on uverse.att.com.
Okay, well that's good for a general overview. Following on that one, just on the implementation of the architecture for Uverse, is this going to be comparable to the DSL rollout in that customers are going to be limited to proximity to your transmitting devices? And
I think the short answer is yes. I mean, essentially what we've done here is we've taken our existing, AT&T telecommunications network, and then we're, with both hardware and software, we're doing enhancements to that network to be able to offer video in this IPTV format. So it's not a flip of a switch to sort of light up the entire telecommunications network. Rather, we're having to do it in a series of build-outs that, again, driven by hardware and software. So I guess that's analogous to the way DSL rolled out as well. We're having to invest in physical plant to enable the delivery of video.
Understood. Is this
it is a phased rollout. So I mentioned at the beginning of the call, if you have an AT&T landline or just enter a service address, the qualification tool may say not available at this time. I believe right under that there's even a link that says, a registered email address, and we'll let you know when it becomes available, because our goal is to continue to build this out.
Okay, well that's the follow-up question there is will the rollout be kind of to a certain point as DSL seems to have been, and we're not going to go any farther, or are there intentions to cover an entire service area over time?
I don't know the exact answer to that. I mean, I'm sure the goal is to provide the service to as many customers as possible.
To throw something in, I guess, just on behalf of the mayor on here, he loves having another option. He's talked his entire life about Lifeline services and the ability to provide more than one provider for citizens because he believes it makes a competitive market. So, we hope that you will continue extending that as far as you can.
And I would follow on that, on Don's comments and say that, broadband infrastructure expansion being a big part of the new federal administration's initiatives. We've got Connect Arkansas, which is a statewide initiative to expand that broadband. We're going to be pushing administratively and in the legislature to expand broadband access into the more rural areas. So we're going to be hoping that AT&T is going to respond to that pressure positively and invest in rolling and expanding that infrastructure, hopefully in a little more robust way than we've seen with DSL services, especially in the more remote areas. I know it's expensive, but as you can add these new services, hopefully the profit margins make a little more sense for you. So,
can I interrupt here, Steve?
Sure.
Just to answer your point about that, because that's my area that I work in,
Great.
government affairs, and the last 3 legislative sessions we've been working on trying to get tax credits for any provider, not just us, any provider that would build out for high-speed internet access. When I say it, I mean affordable high-speed access, because there are methods out there, but they're $50, $60 a month, which makes it cost prohibitive for some people. Last session, 2 years ago, we were able to change what used to be almost a stipend, that's the best way I know how to describe it, for rural telephone carriers to keep their rates in line with other customers. And we were able to change that to a high-cost fund, and so they would have to prove in that they did have high cost to deploy services. And that was the very first time that AT&T has been able to withdraw from the fund, and that to the amount of $3 million per year, all dedicated to delivering high-speed internet access into other parts of Arkansas. So absolutely, we've been working on this and beating our heads against the wall, trying to get some plan that makes sense, because if you get into rural parts of Arkansas, you can't make a business plan where you could even break even in 10 years. That's the downside. And so everybody's waiting to see what happens with the stimulus money and how that can be used to answer that. Because we're very
that's a great answer to the question of how government and private industry can work to address that rollout.
Well, if I could
quickly.
back up on one other point, Steve, I didn't hear you mention you were talking about being able to record 4 streams at one time, but I didn't hear you say what I think is unique about the product is you can record in your living room, you can go to your bedroom to watch it. You don't have to watch it on the television. They call it whole home DVR, which is a nice feature that I didn't hear you speak about.
So Steve, this is Andy again. I just have one more question, and this is about the availability of PEG programming. I don't know if you've seen, but the survey response data for the city of Fayetteville, we've got 3 channels listed. And the 3rd channel there is actually shared between the University of Arkansas and the Fayetteville Public School District. Can you tell me a little bit about what the options are for expanding the availability of PEG programming, and specifically in this case, if we could have separate channels, one for UATV and one for the Fayetteville Public School District, to both offer 24/7 programming?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I would probably would need to circle back with Cynthia, who's on the call, and make sure that it's copacetic with the agreement. But from a technical standpoint, we have the capacity to do so. That's one of the benefits in terms of the flexibility with Uverse TV. What you're saying there is ultimately under you kind of think back to how the user experience work. Under Fayetteville, you'd have 4 channels listed: government channel, community access, UA TV, and then perhaps whatever Fayetteville Public Schools TV, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That can happen. We want to make sure that that is in terms of the agreement and all that kind of stuff that we have the room to do that. Now the question would be the origination point of the content. Are they actually probably what we should probably do is kind of circle back to that after I talk a little bit about the implementation process, and you'll see why I'm asking to hold the question in a sense, because it'll come down to where the origination point is.
Sure, and I think
or is there going to be, or are you thinking in the future there's for the public schools?
Well, in fact, we already have a separate production facility, and if you refer back to the description that was given of the PEG channel and how content can be fed from the city council chambers or the PEG center, or the government channel rather, we have a similar setup currently with UATV and FPS TV, where we kind of run through the same circuit, and there's a sniffer on there that detects to see if FPS TV has content generated. If not, it defaults back to UATV. So I think
Where does that sniffer sit?
I believe that's.
I think it's this is Daniel Phillips, UATV. I think it sits at Fayetteville High School, where
In our production facility.
where the whole signal is sent fiber optically up to Johnson from Fayetteville High School, and physically we are separated. UATV is up on the college campus. The high school is down the hill. We have two separate facilities. So as far as UVerse, I believe it could be split off easily. But as for
that content is being switched at. So I'm looking at. I've got the form in front of me. At 280 North McElroy. Is that where they're?
That's where UATV is coming from.
Aggregated.
That's where UATV is coming from. The aggregation is probably going on at the high school.
At the high school on
and
Stone Street.
And that's
Stone Street.
I didn't understand. I was thinking that the downstream insertion of programming was like commercials and spots like that. I didn't think about FHS. That was what's happening there. So I apologize for the error.
Oh, that's all right. It probably wasn't. It's kind of a vague question in a sense. So
Well, I think we
Let
can
me talk about how we typically solution this, and I think what I'm hearing is that there would be a way to do exactly what you're talking about. So I'll kind of slip into. I kind of talk about this sort of at a high level, especially for folks that aren't extremely technical, and kind of these basic building blocks. And I view it as being 3 building blocks for getting the existing programming or for getting programming in general onto UVerse TV. So the first building block, of course, is generating programming, is generating a signal. And AT&T doesn't have any role in that. You're already doing that. You probably wouldn't want us to have a role in that. Key thing there, though, is it's 24/7. So whatever is being transmitted to AT&T is what's being displayed to customers. And so what I tell a lot of communities, especially sometimes, kind of smaller communities, is if you're not transmitting anything, then customers will see a blank screen with no audio, and that's not a good thing, because they'll either call AT&T or they'll call the city. So I your 3 channels are 24/7. If we were talking about splitting the education channels, then of course, there would need to be, you got to have content 24/7, and we're not involved in that piece.
that would certainly be our intent. We're prepared to do that at any time.
We're both
I talked about that a little bit earlier. The AT&T PEG platform uses the Windows Media 9 codec, and in general, the principal hardware required for that is an encoder. That's the device that takes an analog or other signal and converts it into the IP stream with the specifications that UVerse PEG needs. And then, of course, since it's an IP stream, a router is required as well. The third and final piece is the transport of that signal, of that stream to the AT&T network. And the way that the UVerse PEG platform is designed, what's required is 1.5 megabits, 1.5 megabits per second of dedicated bandwidth, and of course that's got to be 24/7 since it's carrying video traffic. 1.5, as many of you probably know, is the size of a T1 circuit. So those are kind of the steps of getting content to UVerse TV. Now to kind of shift into what we can do, or what AT&T will do in Fayetteville, I think that the agreement, and Cynthia, you can keep me honest here, I think that what the agreement calls for is for the city to convert that signal, but for AT&T to provide some initial one-time support to help get things up and running. And I think the way we like to propose doing this, it actually goes beyond that a little bit, but I think it's in the best interest of everybody in terms of getting content to customers and making sure that we do it efficiently and do it well. So here's how we would do it, or here's how we would like to do it. Instead of just giving you specifications something like that, what we like to do is provide the specific equipment for you, equipment that AT&T Labs is certified for this platform. It's a vendor called Inlet, makes a series of encoders called the Spinnaker, and again, they've been tried and true tested by AT&T Labs, and as well as a Cisco 1800 series router. And just for purposes of making sure that it's done right, not that you couldn't do it right yourself, but to make sure that it fits all the specs, is we would send a team of engineers out and actually configure and install the equipment for you. The equipment would belong to the city, but again, it's using equipment that we know that we've got in use that a lot of other areas or other communities are using, and we know it's a certified good piece of equipment. As for the third and final piece, the transport part.
Steve, wait just 1 second. I think we've got a question at this point.
I just wanted to ask you that what is the life of that equipment, and what type of CIP budgeting will we need in the future for maintaining this?
You know, that's a good question. The second part, I'm not really sure, because I think there's a lot of different ways you could probably approach that as far as, service plans or maintenance plans. Lifetime is a good question too, and one I probably can't answer now. As many of you know, probably for the most part, encoders like this, routers, properly configured, properly ventilated, they just kind of run and do their jobs. But that's not to say, that happens for 100 years. I really don't know, and I won't want to make a liar out of myself by trying to assign 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Although I would, perhaps there's some anecdotal or other kind of research on that kind of thing. As for the second question, again, we partner with a vendor called Telecom who works with our engineers for these kinds of installations, and they very well may have service or maintenance sort of offerings that you could explore.
I have a question. This is Mark from CAT again. The uploading.
I think that's where I interrupted and he was getting ready.
Right. You said it was 1.5 megabits. Is that what you said?
I said for the total delivery, the bit rate for the IP stream is 1.25 megabits per second.
Okay.
There's associated audio and traffic and stuff, but it fits into, if you will, a 1.5 pipe.
Okay. Now, if we don't have the upload capacity for that, can you guys provide that for us? And is that going to be an additional charge?
That's a perfect segue into that third piece, which is the transport piece. And what we can do is provide that for you. So in other words, that 1.544 is your standard T1 circuit. What AT&T will do is provide for each stream a MIS T1 circuit. That's a Managed Internet Services T1 circuit. We'll install it and we'll maintain it ongoing at no cost to the city.
Good.
That gives you that dedicated pipe. You wouldn't have any other traffic on it besides the video programming.
Good.
And you would not be faced with a monthly recurring charge for that. We'll handle that piece.
Yeah, I think a lot of us was worried about that, so we weren't quite sure. I think originally that wasn't the case at the beginning, but I'm glad that's kind of changed.
And that's a concern, especially in the current economic climate. It's a concern for a lot of folks. And on our end, one of the advantages, of course, we're providing a service for free, but there is an advantage to us because it's our network,
Sure.
And so that content never leaves an AT&T facility, and that helps us, or it gives us obviously assurance too. So I'm glad that's well received, because that of course is can be an issue for other communities.
Steve, if you'd been here, you would have seen 4 smiles.
I was going to say, nodding of the heads, going, yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, and I worked with Cynthia and Kathy and others as we kind of interfaced with our business, and it seemed like that was the right way to go. So I'm glad we're able to put that out there, and glad that it resulted in some smiles. So let me kind of jump forward, and stop me at any point, but just if you're thinking, okay, how do you put all this together? Here's how we would propose working this in kind of in terms of a timeline. the first thing we would like to do is send a team of engineers out to each actual site. Actually, let me back up 1 second. So AT&T would provide to the city the hardware required, encoder and a router, and we'd come out to configure it and install it, and we'd provide that T1 circuit in perpetuity. The part that we'd ask the city to help us with is essentially to meet some kind of some engineering conditions, if you will. If you've got there's another document, hopefully you've got in front of you. The title is Important Information Regarding AT&T Tech Solutions. This is the third page of that.
No,
You'll see these essentially 4 conditions
don't have that.
that we would ask the city to help us with. And they're pretty basic. The first one is a place to put the gear. A standard one channel, if we're doing one channel, which means one encoder, one router, requires 8 rack units, and that is meaningful, I'm sure, to some people around the table. We'll provide an encoder, a router, a switch, little patch panel, and a power strip. A nice complete little package there. Requires 8 RUs. If there's 2 channels coming from the same location, same control room, that's 9 RUs because we'll have an encoder that's a dual port that would take 2 RUs instead of 1. Second piece is of course power, and I know not on this document, but we have documentation that gives the specifics. I mean, these are power consuming pieces of equipment, not dramatic, but we want to make sure that you know what the draw is and that there's adequate power. The third thing is we'd ask the city to hand off the signal basically to the gear, and there's a number of different ways to do that. As you look there, the encoder can take an SDI signal or a composite or component or S video, and it needs a balanced audio signal.
Steve, before we go further, both Government Channel and Community Access are currently using unbalanced. I assume there wouldn't be a problem with us just converting, basically leaving a dead pin or something there to unbalanced, from our unbalanced system to your balanced.
Yeah, what we would ask for is for you guys to balance it and provide with an XLR termination for the encoder.
Okay.
The fourth one, the fourth kind of condition is a path from wherever you would want the equipment located, and oftentimes that's in the control room, and sometimes it's not, to the minimum point of entry or demarc, basically where our network ends. So we would terminate that T1 circuit at that telco demarc, and I know that's called different things in different areas and in different buildings. There's the telephone room or telephone closet or something like that. That's where that T1 circuit ends, and we'll mount a smart jack there. There needs to be connectivity, of course, between the two. You've got a conduit, clear conduit with the pull string. We'll pull it. We pull Cat5 cable there. If you don't, then we'd ask the city to point out pairs. Identify that's essentially the city's or the building's network. And so we would ask that the city either provide, tell us what pairs match to what, because again, that's not our facilities, or pull Cat5 if there's not a conduit that we can pull it through. And all of these things, I'm kind of jumping back to the timeline. We're talking about them on the phone, and there's a lot of questions. Well, what about this, and how about that? That's why the first step of this process is not the installation of this gear, but what we just call a site visit. We'll have an engineer and one of our vendors come out and just sit down and talk with the technical folks at each location and talk through these conditions, take a look at the equipment, take a look at the gear, and then they do what engineers do, which is make a nice, clean report, with their findings, which we of course would share with the city, make sure everyone agrees to what the site report says, and if there's any of these things that need to be addressed, the report would highlight that stuff, and we kind of make that report a decision, go, no go sort of thing. We want to make sure everyone's on the same page and clear about things are ready to go, or if anything needs to get done, that everyone's clear on that, and then we would wait on ordering that T1 circuit and scheduling, ordering equipment and scheduling installation until we sort of get a thumbs up from everyone involved. uncertainty or questions or issues about anything.
Question.
And that's, again, I'll mention that site visit isn't necessarily a commitment to do anything. It just gives us all AT&T as well as the city's facilities and locations visibility into what the what the lay of the land looks like on the ground.
Steve, we have some
And then, based on getting the thumbs up on that report that everyone's in agreement, then we'd order the circuits and then we'd order equipment. Just from a timeline perspective, we're usually told 45 days to get that circuit built and installed. Sometimes it doesn't take that long, and if things are moving along well, we can even order that circuit in advance if necessary. But just to let you know, kind of from a timing perspective, we wouldn't want to bring equipment out and do the installation for you until that circuit is installed that gives us connectivity back to the Everse network. So that's kind of the milestone. But we would schedule, or we would time the installation of gear and the turn up of everything based on what that circuit installation date looks like. Then, because this is a new market for us, once we get the circuit installed and equipment installed, there's a couple of weeks where we've got to do internal work in our video hub office, and we do testing to make sure everything's working properly. So it can be a couple of weeks or 3 weeks after the installation date before we turn it up live for customers.
Steve, we have some
Final piece
questions.
would be
Steve!
what we'll do once we've got all of that installed, so the programming is live for customers. We want to make sure that it's done right. We certainly think it's done right, but AT&T will make sure that for first 90 days after that go live date, everything's working fine. If anything were to happen, we'll troubleshoot it and we'll deal with it. After that 90 days, we arrange either a brief conference call or just share some information via email and give the city the password and login information for the encoder and the router. We'll maintain that for that first 90 days so we've got access to the device should there be any issues. After that, of course, we want to make sure you've got it. And so around that 90-day period, we'll make sure that the city has all of the relevant information about the gear.
Steve, we've got questions here.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, this is Neil from the government channel. I'm thinking we might have a little issue here. Our building is addressed at 101 West Rock Street, and the DMARC is at 140 West Rock Street. I believe that's across the street. And as far as I know, there are no conduits of any kind running there. I think it's all aerial. Is there any way we can get those T1 lines basically brought into our building so they're not hanging out at that DMARC? We can have them in there. We have minimum cable length runs.
I think that would be something we'd have to kind of vet out at that site visit.
Okay.
If the actual DMARC, 100, the AT&T DMARC is at 140 West Rock Street, that's probably where they're going to terminate the T1. And I don't think they can extend that T1. What we generally do is, or what I ask for in those site visits is to make sure that, video production, technical, as well as whatever the right term is, IT or network or IT management or something, people are there that can take us to that DMARC and that we can kind of make sure that we can kind of get a full understanding. My understanding is that Cat 3, just your standard twisted pair, will work up to a certain distance if there are identifiable pairs. And whether or not they're aerial or not, I'm not even sure if that's an issue. But I think we can talk through those types of issues while we're on site and have the engineers talking to the network folks with the city as well.
Do we have a scheduled time for this meeting?
We don't, but we can get started on that today if everyone is ready to move forward. We usually ask for about 3 weeks, just because we might have some folks that are traveling there. But Kathy, if we could ask you to help kind of coordinate that, if you could get some dates that are available from the 3 locations, so we could do these site visits all at the same time, or on the same day, that would help. And then I'll circle back with the engineers and try to get it scheduled. So don't have it on the books today, but we can get that on the books quickly.
And Steve, don't forget we may have that work stoppage issue.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and you and I can talk about that offline, but I think we'll be able to keep the ball rolling here. Were there other questions?
I guess, Steve, this is Don out of the mayor's office. Are we when will you know about the possibility of having both a UATV and a Fayetteville Public Education channel?
I would like to circle back with some internal folks to talk through that a little bit, but I think I should be able to get you an answer by the end of the week.
Okay.
Is it fair to assume that there would be no issues with 24/7 content on both?
That's correct.
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Okay. So what that might amount to is, I'm getting myself a little bit confused on the programming locations, but for AT&T's perspective, that's not 3 encoders, 3 routers, and 3 T1s. That would be 4 encoders, 4 routers, and 4 T1s. So I want to make sure that I sort of vet that out internally before saying sure. Okay.
Right. And I guess just to put a plug in on that, we have a constant request for capabilities from both of those entities. We don't want to jeopardize the university's program and being able to have one of the huge advantages in student recruitment is to have a channel that they can run and operate and dedicate. And at the same time, we don't want to eliminate the opportunity to keep our citizens involved on the Fayetteville public school system side, particularly in light of a new high school discussion, new superintendent hire, new curriculum redesign. So if there's any way at all to make it happen, we certainly want to advocate it.
Well, that makes perfect sense, and I just think in general terms that's one of the great things about the way we do PEG on Uverse. As I mentioned, there is a capital and an ongoing expense on the AT&T side that wasn't necessarily budgeted, and I want to make sure that I do whatever I can to make sure that I can get a green light on that. Let's see, I've got 11 o'clock. I know we just booked an hour, and I apologize if we run a little bit late. I do want to circle back, and I think it's to Neil, to think that I think we're probably going to have to scratch our heads a little bit and think about how we might be able to make this work. Because as you can see now with the way we would solution this, what we need is the 24/7, aggregated signal somewhere on city facilities where we can provide that equipment as well as terminate a T1 circuit. And so I think if I'm understanding correctly, the only access you have to the final, if you will, aggregated signal is via a standard, kind of customer-facing return feed, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. So I don't think we maybe since we're a little bit behind time already, I don't think we solved that right now. But I think I understand, and Neil will probably maybe we'll even circle back with you through Kathy to talk a little bit more about how we might do that.
Sure.
As for the others, I think community access television. Now that is also at 101 West Rock, but that's the aggregated signal going out, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then the UA TV signal is actually really it's not at McElroy, it's at the high school. That the current 24/7, if you will, aggregated signal is at the high school. If we've got this sort of idea on the table of a public schools channel as well as a UA TV channel. Where is either one? Would that mean that the UA TV is at the high school, or would that mean that the independent signals would be at some public school facility and then at 280 North McElroy?
That's correct. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, we're operating off the
You have
university
the public
campus.
schools
They're at
facility address off the top of their head?
The high school is at 1001 West Stone Street.
1001 West Stone. And that's where the public schools channel, if you will, would originate from, yeah?
That's correct.
Okay.
And I guess the engineering walk-off would be where we would determine where we'd have to house the actual equipment, whether it be at one location or split between the two.
Okay. I think so. Okay, so here's what I think we're in, if everyone there is kind of ready to move forward, then the next thing to do would be to schedule some of these site visits, and in the meantime kind of start thinking through how we would solution this for the government channel.
Peg Center. We currently get the return line from Cox, so we can monitor our own channel and verify that in case something's going wrong, we can see that, yeah, we are sending something, but it's not being received. Are we going to have AT&T Uverse fed into our facility so we'll have the same monitoring capabilities?
I don't think so. It would depend on whether the facility is in is passed by the network. But there is I can tell you this, and I can send you some information on this. There is a way, just simply with a laptop or a PC, to use an unused port on that router to make sure that you're seeing the post encoded signal going out.
Okay.
That doesn't give you that's not the same. I understand as having a set-top box on your desk, but it does give you certainty that the stream is leaving the facility appropriately. And then on the AT&T side, we're obviously monitoring the service in general and can monitor that T1 as well. So we would be able to oftentimes proactively know if there's any issues with the network itself.
So there's no way that you can give the representatives here each a Uverse at home so we can all monitor it.
I don't want it.
I think we have to take that one offline. I think I'm going to be. I've got a little bit of a challenge going for 4 channels instead of 3. Let me chip away at that one first.
All right, sounds good.